All right, in just a few hours, fraud investigator Harry Markopolos will make his first appearance to try and testify on Capitol Hill to talk about his repeated warnings about Bernie Madoff and all those warnings that he sent to the Securities and Exchange Commission. Here now with the first on CNBC with a preview of what to expect from that is Representative Kanjorski. He is the chairman of the Capital Markets Subcommittee. And, sir, thank you for being with us this morning.
Pleasure, Becky.
This is the first time we're going to be hearing from Harry Markopolos. People have been waiting to hear about how he identified what was happening at Madoff's fund before anyone else. What are you hoping to hear today?
Well, I've read his testimony, so I have an idea of what he's going to say. And I think the American people are going to be pleased that there are still people with great consciences out there that pursue public protection positions, and that's what Markopolos is, a real good whistleblower of the highest order. And
there are, of course, the concerns that he was a whistleblower who was blowing the whistle to the SEC, but nobody seemed to hear it. You also have several people from the SEC who will be testifying today. What, in your opinion, would be a legitimate reason for why they didn't follow up with what he was saying?
Well, first of all, we're going to administer a hearing test to see if they need a hearing aid, because obviously they couldn't hear Mr. Markopolos when he was telling them over 10 years of the problems that existed there.
Congressman, from your perspective, is the focus appropriately on what went wrong, or is the focus appropriately on what we can do to make it right? How much investigation, how much prescription?
What we're doing is using this as a case study and a platform as we start to look at the overall regulatory reform concept in the United States. There is any question our system now is broken, and we've got to see whether or not it requires only minor patches or whether it needs an entirely new overhaul. I think the latter is probably the fact, but this case is probably providing us with more information and capacity to make that study in an understandable way than any other pending case. So that's what we're using it for, the platform which to build the reform of regulation in the United States.
Is it fair, based on your answer before about how you're going to be administering a hearing test, that you're a little disgusted right now with the Securities and Exchange Commission?
I think in many instances, I think the citizens will. I think their unwillingness to be cooperative and to play the role that they're smarter and better and more important than any of us, whether it's the Congress or the citizens, is sort of unacceptable. And when you listen to their testimony, you'll get to appreciate the fact that these appear to me, anyway, to be regulators going wild in a way and having their own culture down there. And if nothing else, it's a great example of bad culture of bureaucracy.
There are some people who have suggested that the SEC doesn't have the tools or the funding that it would need to do its job properly. What do you say to people who think that?
Well, I think that's a possibility, but if they need more tools, it's their obligation to tell the Congress and the American people. Right now, they're trying to take the best of all worlds, remaining silent and hoping the storm will pass over their heads. That's not going to happen. I think they're just going to look more inept than they actually were.
Well, the SEC has had an extraordinarily broad mandate for an extraordinarily long time, and some elements of it have done an extremely good job. Isn't narrowing the mandate and maybe carving up some of these investigative and prosecutorial responsibilities a sensible response on the part of the Congress?
Well, it could be. That's what we have to determine. I don't know. I don't want to prejudge that situation, but I think what it indicates is there are holes out there and vacuums that have to be filled. And it means we need an overall regulatory system that covers everything, and that they don't fight among themselves in jurisdiction, and that we don't have stovepiping that presently seems to exist at the SEC. I can't lay the whole blame on the SEC, and I don't attempt to do that. But I guess I'm a little frustrated in that I don't think they've been as helpful as they could have been, certainly in these last couple of months.
What you were just describing, though, sounds like something equivalent towards the equivalency of creating the Homeland Security Defense Agency that oversaw all the different bodies that would be doing anything in terms of security for the United States. Is that what you're thinking of creating?
I think there isn't any question that we're going to be addressing a systemic risk regulator, which probably has to have very broad venue. And in doing that, we have to restructure what venue is out there among all the various regulators. And we probably have too many regulators, there's no question of that, both at the federal level and at the state level. And I think we have to look at the reform of that regulatory regime, if you will, to see what we can do to have a more efficient and more effective methodology brought to bear. That's what's going to grow out of this crisis, I think.
Congressman, there was a new IG report that came out yesterday afternoon saying that the SEC doesn't follow its own policies just in terms of recovering money, shareholder money, and using that money properly. Do you have any thoughts on that report?
I've just heard of the report this morning. I haven't had a chance, honestly, to read it. And, you know, some of us tend to give opinions without knowing the facts of the base. I hope I'm not guilty of that misdemeanor.
We appreciate that sentiment, and Congressman, appreciate your time. Hope to see you back again very soon to get your thoughts after you go through this hearing today.
Thank you very much, Becky.